Potawatomi,
arts,
culture,
and entertainment.
This is a Pace production.
So thankfully tonight, here before us, we also have Grant Wood. So please put your hands together for Grant Wood. And
I hope that comes afterwards.
Yeah, that'll definitely come afterwards. So, Mr. Wood, I hand it off to you. And,
Thank you.
Your story.
Thank you very much, Adam. And it's quite a story of Grant Wood. And I just want you to, I'll start from the very beginning. My name is Grant DeVolson Wood. Now, I got the name Grant from a person that was born Hiram Ulysses Grant. Does anyone know who that is? Okay. His mother, in order to get him into West Point Cadet in the school, changed his name around and put U.S. Grant. Now do we know who we were talking about? And he got into West Point, became a general, and also our 18th president of the United States. And I was very proud to be named after him. But just as a side note, people would ask him, what does the S stand for in your name? And he would tell them, I don't know, you have to ask my mother. DeVolson I got from my grandpa on my mother's side, Hattie Weaver. Grandpa DeVolson Weaver and Hattie Weaver lived together in Anamosa. Now, Hattie Weaver was a school teacher. She was in her late 20s, and she was not married. And sometimes that meant a road to Old Maid. But something happened. She met Frances Mayville Wood, and the two fell in love. And that's where I got my last name, a part of my name, Wood. It's from Frances Mayville Wood. Now, Frances Mayville Wood had a father, which I will refer to as Papa Wood, because he's a grandfather on my dad's side. He was the meanest, most hateful person you'd ever want to meet. He hated my mother, and I will tell you the reason why. He hated her because she didn't have a dowry, and she didn't have money or inheritance. And he told his three sons, with Francis was the head of the family, or the oldest son, listen, you only marry for one reason. You marry for money, or you marry for inheritance, because that will make us Woods land barons. He wanted to be the biggest land baron in Anamosa County. And unfortunately, when Frances said, Dad, I want to marry Hattie Weaver, and he asked her, does he have any dower? Does she have any money? Oh, no, Dad, she's just as poor. Why are you getting married? And Frances would have said something sheepishly like, love? It was just unknown in Papa Wood's language. And he became such a terrible grandpa to me and to my family, the Weavers, is that you'll hear more about him later and what he'd done to deserve that title of the worst person. Like Christ would say, he should never have been born. So anyhow, the two still decided to get married. And it's starting out in a negative step with all this commotion and with Papa Wood. And it was the day Mother told me, she told me about her wedding. The wedding church was fine. They let the two get together and got married. But it was the party afterwards that everyone enjoyed. It was a chivalry. And it was going to be held at Papa Wood's house. Papa Wood came up to my mother and told her, Hattie, you are not invited to my party. You're not invited to your party. And she said, well, it's my wedding. He said, you will not step foot in my house, ever. That's how their marriage started. Well, she said she swallowed her pride. She told Frances, get down there, go to the party, make sure you get the gifts, because most of the gifts were very practical. Most of the gifts were like for the kitchen and for the farm and for the house. And so Frances went down and did what she said. And then he told Frances, he said, because you did this, you might influence your other brothers not to marry for money. I'm going to tell you, we will not help you in your farm. Neither of the two brothers will help you in the farm, and neither will I. And so that's how they started out their marriage. But the beautiful part about the marriage is that their union, they loved each other, and they had their first child. It was Frank. Frank Wood, I swear he must have been born with muscles. He was born with a shock of hair, with a grizzled chin. This man was, he was ripped. And I remember him, I was born 5 years later, and I was born pudgy, I was born rotund, or in a better word, I was born fat. And I had to have glasses in my early stage of life. But when I remember Frank, I had something that Frank didn't have. I had a precocious brain, and I could remember everything. I had a photographic mind. And another thing that I had was the ability to see vibrant, beautiful colors that Mother Nature had. It was all a part of me. I would go out with Frank, well, he would go out and dig maybe a garden or something, and I see some creature, and it just fascinated me. And I remember the first one I saw was a caterpillar. And I looked at it, it was kind of a fuzzy yellow type thing with black spots and a red face. And I would observe him going this way. Then I would turn around and observe him going this way. Observe him going this way, and then going this way. And I just loved to go home and tell my mom. Now, Mom was usually always in the kitchen. And at one time, I wanted to draw. It was like 3 or 4 years old. I wanted to draw. I saw my dad's stationery, and what I did is I went up, took some of the stationery, and I was drawing what I saw so I could show it to my mom. And my dad caught me, and he said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I was drawing, Dad, but I saw something outside I thought was really fantastic." "Son," and he took the paper away from me, he says, "I'm going to tell you, don't ever touch my stationery again. Don't you ever use my ink pen, and don't you ever use my ink. If I ever see this, I will give you a beating that you will never forget. Because I wanted to tell you right now, whatever's in your brain, get it out. Because you're going to be a farmer. Understand that. You're going to be a farmer." And it just scared me. It scared me, and Dad left. Mom came out of the kitchen, and she said, "Come with me. I've got something I want to show you." I went in there, and she said, "No, I know we can't do this because Dad doesn't want you to do this. But I want to enhance your ability because it looks like you want to be an artist. You love the colors, and you describe them to me. So here's what I'm going to do. We can't use a stationery. We don't have a pen. We don't have ink. But I've got something that will work." And Mom always did. I just loved her. She said, now we're going to use the twigs that I put my fire into my stove with. We're going to light a twig. Now you see it? And Adam had provided these over here, which I thought was very nice. And so I would light this on fire. And all of a sudden you'd see the crusty ashes forming. And she says, you have to put it out at the right time. When they're kind of gray, turning to black. And she said, when you get done, you blow the fire out, and you take your spit. You spit on it because your spit has a cohesive quality. He said, it'll hold the ashes together. And watch this. And she had boxes of these crackers that came to her house. And the boxes of crackers were kind of bleached white. And she could cut them up, and they were almost like cardboard. She could cut them up, and she said, now watch what I can do. And she took her, and she made a line. I looked at that line, and I said, Mom, I can draw with that. She says, I want you to learn how to draw using ashes from the fireplace and the twigs that I can give you. Now, as soon as I know that you can do that safely, I'm going to hide you under the kitchen table. And the kitchen table was small because when the family was not eating, they would take the lifts out and become small. And the family table always had a red and white checkered cloth. It would come down to the floor. And the beautiful part about it was, for me, is he said, now you can crawl underneath there, and inside, he said, I will set a lamp, and then the boxes, and then twigs. And I know your safety, you've done it for a couple of weeks now. So I would get under there. And when the cloth came down, I felt I was in my own little room. It was my room. It was my space. And it felt so comfortable. It felt so nice because it was the warmest room in the house. And of course, we didn't have the ear pods for music and everything, but guess what I had? I had Mom humming. Mom hummed 2 favorite songs she loved. One was the Little Brown Church in the Dell, and the other was the Ave Maria. And she would hum that, and I would take my stylus, burn my twig, blow it out, put the spit on it, and draw. And I would draw what I saw outside with Frank. And it was just a constant deal. I would always be his constant companion, and he would scare up something, and I would follow that something. I would see the beauty in the arrangement, and I could see the beauty in animate objects, inanimate objects. I could see the colors in weeds. I could see the colors in the trees and leaves in the fall, the birds when they come back from the south. I mean, I was Mother Nature's famous pupil. I mean, she really loved me because I love Mother Nature and all the colors. But I was always drawing in black and white. It was always black and white, but I didn't mind. And we had chickens on the farm. They were Rhode Island hens, and I loved drawing their wings because their wings were half moons. They were half moons, and I could dip that and show that and put that. And when I took the painting out from underneath the table, and I give it to my mom, and we always had to hide me because Dad would be out doing the farm work. And so it was easy at that early time for me to be under that table a long time. I would go out and show Mom, and because they were ashes, they would dry. And she could brush off what I drew, and I could reuse the stylus all over again. So I was doing conservation. It was working out really well. Well, I was about 5 years old, and I didn't have any chores on the farm yet. I would go out with Frank, but I was going to school. I went to school, and the kid looked at me, and he says, well, you don't look anything like Frank. Frank is ripped. Who are you? And he goes, well, I'm his brother. Nah, you're an orphan. You're an orphan. You came from New York. You're an orphan. You came from those rat-infested houses down there. They didn't have mother. They're nice people, the orphans. Now, no problem. But he said they have no parents, and they come all in the Midwest, and they ship them here, and they ship them there for one reason, because they can help mothers and dads on the farm. Oh my God! I said I can't be an orphan. I don't want to be an orphan. But I didn't look anything like Frank. So I went home to Mom. Mom, am I an orphan? No, son, you are not an orphan. You came from me. You are not an orphan. Well, how come Frank looks like this and I look like this? Son, I don't know the reason. I don't know the reason, but you are not an orphan. Oh, okay, Mom, okay. Well, 2 years later, my brother John was born. And the neighbors came around, and they said, man, he looks just like Frank. And that started the argument again. Mom, I know I'm an orphan. Now, look at John, look at Frank, look at me. Tell me I'm not an orphan. Son, I've got a birth certificate. I've got everything to prove that you are not an orphan. You are from me. You came from my womb. You are not an orphan. Yeah, Mom. Yeah, I believe you. Yeah. 2 years later, Nancy was born. Nancy looks just like me. And so that stopped the argument right there. But she turned out to be the most feisty, the most irritating sister you ever wanted to have. And she wouldn't pick on John because John would beat the snot out of her. And she wouldn't pick on Frank because Frank was just too big. So who did she pick on? Unaggressive, passive me. And she kept calling me, and she would come in and just irritate me, especially under the table. And I would say, get away from me, get away from me. And then, so she started calling me Gus. I said, what is Gus? Oh, I don't know, you're Gus. And I said, so one day she was coming in the door, and the light was on the background, and I could see her silhouette, and with my artistic brain, I looked at her shape, and I said, you know something, Nancy? You look like a goat. And so I start calling her Nancy, Nancy. Well, after a while, I shortened it down to Nan. Nan. I mean, that was really the bleed up of a goat. That almost started World War I. It was a fight to the finish, but I wanted to know all your grandparents and all your parents here, even though you may think your children are going to kill each other or hurt or maim each other, I want you to know that your Nan took her name as Nan officially years later, and we became the best of friends. She was my most trusted ally, and I loved her dearly. And she became blind in her older age, but I just loved her dearly. But at that time, it was quite a problem dealing with that. Well, in school, I had what you call attention deficit disorder. I would be going down with Frank, something would come out, and I would be focusing, going to school, trying to get there on time, and all of a sudden something would happen. A rabbit would jump out, another animal, and I would turn and follow that, and I would be late. And somehow the teacher always, was very tolerant of me for being late because she loved the way I could describe things. She loved the way I could take everything in Mother Nature and describe it to her. And she knew my dad would not want me to use his stationery and ink and pen. And so one day she said, now the birds are coming back from the south. Here is a book by Audubon. It's called The Birds of North America. I know you have a photographic mind. Could you look for the birds and then take your book and thumb through the book, and I've got a piece of paper in there and I've got an ink pen, and you can write the name of the bird that you saw and identify and bring the paper back to me in a couple of weeks because I have to return the book. And I would sit, because I wanted to tell you, now I was only about 7, and I wanted to tell you that I would sit down in the loft, and I had to because Dad would see me if I was anyplace else. And by that time, I had certain chores to do. Well, Frank was always with me, and Frank would always do my chores for me when I went out and scampered with something else that caught my attention. So in the barn, we were there looking at the birds, and I could see the most beautiful birds coming in, the plumage, the red beard. I mean, I could see the colors and the vibrant colors that every bird had. And I could look it up, and I would write the name down in a piece of paper. Little did I know that that piece of paper was going to be my downfall. I went in, I turned it over to my teacher, and she said, my goodness, you saw a lot. And of course, Frank would always be doing my work for me. And so I could sit up there and do these things. And it had to be a Sunday morning because we were all in the house, and it probably was a Sunday morning, I can remember. I would read the funnies to the kids from the newspaper. Now the funnies were the only thing Dad would allow in the house. He would not allow any Aesop's fables, no fiction, children's stories was ever entered into the Wood household. everything had to be nonfiction. But he would allow us to read the funnies, and with my precocious brain, they loved me doing and reading the funnies. We were sitting there, it was kind of quiet, and all of a sudden, please cover your ears, because the loudest voice came out, "Grant DeVolson Wood, come here!" It was my father. It was a very strident voice. And I looked at my kid, and I looked at Fran and Nan, and I looked at John and Frank, and he said, "You better get up there." So I got up there, and I just saw him. He had the paper in his hand. He never said a word. He turned the paper over. He pointed to an article. He said, "Read that." I put my glasses on. Master Grant DeVolson Wood discloses over 50 species of birds from his loft and I looked up at Dad. He says, "How in the hell could you have sat up there putting over 50 species of birds and still get your work?" He put 2 and 2 together. "Frank, come here." Frank came and said, "Now tell me the truth. Did you help Grant with his chores?" "Yes, Dad." "Stop it right now. Don't ever do that again. Grant Wood, go down in the willow tree and get a branch. I'm going to beat you to give him your first hard beating tonight. And I'm going to beat some sense into you. You're going to be a farmer." I went down, I got the smallest branch possible. I was wrong. I shouldn't have got the smallest. Came upstairs and he said, "Bare your bottom and lean over the table." Things were getting serious. I said, "Not in front of brothers and sisters. They're going to watch because they are going to learn with you that you are going to be a farmer and so are they. I'm going to do this job and I'm going to be successful at what I do. Your boys are going to be farmers, my boys are going to be farmers, and Nan's are going to help out in the kitchen." And so I bared my bottom, and oh my God, it was embarrassing. And all of a sudden, he started whapping me. "Whap, you're going to be a farmer. Whap, you're going to be a farmer." And it started getting harder and harder, and it was beating, and it was just obsessed with beating me. And finally, Mom said, "Francis, stop!" And he just stopped. He goes, "I want you to get down in the cellar, no supper, and I'll come down and pick you up when you're ready to come out." One thing I never missed was Mom's cooking. I loved her. I never missed a meal. And I was so hungry, and my bottom was so red that no one ever wanted to go down to the cellar. Not even for a jar of tomatoes or anything, because it was a dirt floor. It was dark, danky, and dingy. And I had no idea what animals or creatures or insects were down there, and I would never draw them. And I didn't go down the steps because I couldn't sit on the steps because my rump was sore. So I stayed on top, and my stomach was just screaming for food. And there was a floor joist that came down from the floor, and I could lean against it. And that's how I was. All of a sudden, the door opened. I looked, and I could see a silhouette of a person coming in, shoving something on the floor, quickly shutting the door. Guess who it was? Mom. Mom with a plate of food. I took that plate of food. I don't think I chewed it. I think I swallowed it whole. And that really helped the pain. And then I thought, every boy at that age carries a pocket knife. And so on the floor joist, I thought, well, to pass time, I'm going to put my initials in it. I started to put my initials in the G, and it was really tough wood. And so I thought, well, I don't know how long it's going to take me to make the G. I didn't get half of it done when it was time for me to get out. I just want you to know, from about 7 years old, and Dad watched me every step of the way. And because of my attention deficit disorder, he used me as an example, and I had so many whippings that not only did I put my initials in, I put my whole name in, Grant Wood, and when I was there so often, because of the beating, I made an entire sentence. I put, Grant Wood was born here. I misspelled born. I don't know why, but I misspelled born. But that was my whole 2 years in which it was constant beatings, and because I just couldn't get my work done. Dad would put an assignment on me, and I just couldn't get it done, and then comes another whipping. And that's how many I had. I was about 9 years old. And it was beginning to be spring, and Dad had been sick for a couple of weeks, and he was on the couch, and he got up. He came up to the table, sat down, and he ate some. He said, I'm feeling better. He got up from the table, went over to the window, and collapsed. I noticed right from his face, he turned blue. And Mother said, Frank, go in at Nanamosa and please get the doctor. Now, I don't know if Frank attached a buggy, a horse and buggy, together to get in. I don't think so. I think he ran. In record time, the doctor came up, saw him, and pronounced him dead. He said, you're going to have to go down to the Woods house and tell him that his son is dead. Mom did not want to do that because he knew how much Mr. Wood hated her. But she decided to do that, and she went and knocked on the door. And I remember she came back and she said, he is the most hateful man. That's all she said about him. She wouldn't say a bad word about anybody, but she said he is an awful hated man. And I gathered from that he probably blamed her for his death. I don't know. Well, it had been 15 years since their marriage, and the price of land had gone up. And people were coming from around buying land around the Anamosa area. And Anamosa became an incorporated city. And in the incorporated city, they were going to put a cemetery. And they said, in the cemetery plots, we're going to issue all the plots in alphabetical order. Guess where the Weavers were with the Woods? There was no one in between. And if you go down to Anamosa, you will see my grave right on the Weaver side of the plots. And that had become such a contentious point again between the Woods and the Weavers, was the cemetery plots, and that was later in my life. But anyhow, my dad was dead. So Mom said, well, we got to get some help. And of course, the Woods would never help us. So we tried the neighbors. And the neighbors said they were told by Mr. Wood not to help her because he killed my son. I mean, it was just these kind of rumors that went around. And so Mother said, we're going to have to sell the farm. We should get enough equity. And in the meantime, my grandpa from my mom's side, DeVolson, had moved to Cedar Rapids. And so we wrote him, and so she tried to sell the farm, and people came from all around for the auction. Guess how many bidders there were? And guess who the bidder was? Mr. Wood, Grandpa Wood. And Grandpa Wood bid pennies on the dollars and got the land cheap. And so it gave Mom a little money which she could put maybe a down payment for a home in Cedar Rapids. I kept asking Mom, what's going to happen to us? And she says, please don't ask me now. I don't know if you're going to put you back in school. I don't know if we're going to have you go out and work. We don't have a lot of money. We don't have a lot of money. They bought everything so cheaply. Mr. Wood did. So we decided we were going to head back. And the future just looked so crowded and so so gloomy and gray, and I was never feeling so low. And we got in the wagon with Grandpa DeVolson, and we were going back to Cedar Rapids. And along came a horseman, and he said, "'Tis a sad day for the nation. 'Tis a sad day for the nation. The father of our country was shot, and he's not expected to live." I equated our father dying and all the turmoil and strife and everything that has caused us and our family. I said to my mom, "Well, what would the father of the country, if he died, wouldn't that cause a lot of turmoil throughout the nation?" And she said, "No, son, no. She said, "We have a vice president. He will take office and he will become the new father. You don't have to worry about anything like that happening, what happened to us." Oh, and that's great. Who is the vice president? I think he's a fine man. His name is Teddy Roosevelt. Well, Teddy Roosevelt it was like the old adage said, when you close a door, another window opens. And of course, what did Teddy become? The only 20th century president to be put on Mount Rushmore. He was a great president for the nation. And it was beautiful to have him. But he took the place of someone Mr. McKinley. And so as we were driving to Cedar Rapids, when I thought about the loneliness and depression that was affecting me, I didn't realize it was a window opening for me. We got to Cedar Rapids, and Mom said, "I decided you guys are going back to school. If I have to do all the laundry and the ironing for the entire Cedar Rapids people, you are going back to school." I was so relieved. So the first day of school came, and we always wore hand-me-downs. I had to wear Frank's, and Frank was thin in his stomach, and Mom had to reinforce the buttons on my stomach deal so they wouldn't pop out. So this is what I was used to. So we went to Cedar Rapids School. It was junior high, and the kids started making fun of us, started making fun of our clothes. And I didn't mind, I just kept walking. My brother John got in an instant fight, and he hit a guy right in the mouth. And of course, that started the whole gang fighting against the Woods, against Grant and Frank and that. No one picked on Frank. No one picked on, and John was just, he loved getting in fights. And they were coming after me, and I said, "Hey, listen, I'm just not aggressive. I don't want to fight." And so they left me alone. And I looked at my class schedule, and it was the first time we had a class schedule because it was always a one-room schoolhouse for us. I looked at the class schedule, and we went to different rooms for different subjects. I thought that was so cool. And one of the subjects was art. Oh my God, we signed up for art right away. I got in the art room, and of course I wanted to be the first one there so I could get in the back and not be noticed. And I could sit in the last seat and just not be noticed. I didn't want to be noticed. And I was back there. All of a sudden I look, there was a piece of paper on my desk. And beside it was a yellow box. On the yellow box was Bittman and Smith Company, and guess what it was? The first time I've ever seen anything like this. And I just looked at it, and it said, "School Crayons." School Crayons, Benny and Smith Company. I opened it up, and my eyes got as big as saucers. All of a sudden, I saw pencils that had color. And I said, I can draw with color. And I started taking and drawing on the piece of paper, and I was using all the colors that was available. And then I stopped, and I said, oh my God, I shouldn't have done that. I bet I was supposed to keep that paper pristine and clean and not do anything with it. My teacher was Emma Groton. She walked through the door and she said, class, she says, look on your desks. You got these things, open the box up, and I want you to take those pencils, those colored pencils, and draw whatever you want to draw on that piece of paper. Oh God, I was relieved. I was relieved. And so she says, I'm going to walk around. This is our first class. I'm going to walk around and see what you do. She walked around and she kept walking and walking and asking kids their names. And all of a sudden she came my back and she stopped. And I wondered, what's going on? Why is she stopping? Why don't she keep on moving? And she asked, tapped me on the shoulder, said, what's your name? I said, Grant Wood. Class, look at this paper. This is an artist. And I was so relieved. I couldn't wait to get home to tell my mom. I said, Mom, my art teacher called me an artist, and she liked my paper. And it just made me feel so good. And about 3 months later, Crayon sponsored a national contest. They said, they gave everyone a piece of that wanted to go into the contest, every school child. It was a pin oak leaf. It was a bare one. It was all it was in the outline, and we were supposed to color it. I knew exactly what I was going to do because I had pin oak leaves around in our house, back on the farm, and always a week or so before the tree would detach them and throw them down, they were at their most brilliant colors, the browns and the greens and the swirls of yellow and gold. And man, I had those pencils, and I colored exactly what I thought that leaf should look like. Well, it wasn't for a couple of months. Emma Groton came in, and she said, class, I want you to know throughout the entire nation, we have the third place winner here in this classroom. Grant Wood, will you come forward? Well, he had to come forward because I just hated to come forward. And he said, come and get your certificate. I went up there so proudly and I got my certificate and I turned around and went, no, hold on now, there was another prize. It was a $5 bill. They had given the third place winner a $5 bill. I looked at the bill, I'd never seen one. I'd never seen a $5 bill. I looked at the bill and there was an Indian chief on it. I had found out later that was the only time in American history, even up to 2021, that an Indian was on a bill. That was the only time the American print put an Indian on the money. It was this Chief Onapapa from the Pawnee. And I thought, later on in life, I thought, why couldn't they honor them more? But that was the only time. But I had it. And I went home, and I was so proud of it. I went home, and I said, Mom, guess what I won? And I showed her my certificate. And then I said, guess what else? And Mom, from all the things that you've done for me, you kept me alive, and you kept my artistry alive, even through the terrible times with Dad. This is your $5 bill. She said, this calls for a celebration. So Nan would come over, she took Nan Wood and she said, and Frank, let's go to the grocery store. Well, for $5, I don't know if you can realize how much groceries that would have bought. They came back and they were loaded. But the first thing that would have popped out was rock candy. And we all had our share of rock candy. And we're all in, and of course Mom was cooking and we were all so happy. And then she said, Grant, there's a package over there. Why don't you look for it? See what it is. So I went over. I picked up the package. And inside the package was some stationery, an ink pen, and some ink. I remember looking at Mom, and I started crying, and all the tears that I held back from all the beatings just seemed to come flooding out. And she said, "Son," she says, "are you happy?" I said, "I'm happy, but I feel so guilty because of Dad." And I ran into the bedroom. It's almost like that. I ran into the bedroom and I hid my head in a pillow and I cried. And my mom came in and she hugged me and she said, "Grant Wood, don't you ever feel guilty. You went through fire, you went through hell, you went through pain. And when you didn't cry, I cried for you. Don't you ever feel guilty. You are going to be an artist." It was deigned to start that way. God had made it that way. You were to be an artist. And she put her arms around me and started rubbing my hair. She started humming. And it just took me back to the kitchen table where I felt so comfortable and secure. And I remember asking her, says, "Mom, am I going to be an artist?" She said, "Yes." "Mom, will you be there for me? Will you help me?" And she said, "Every step of the way, I'll be there for you." And she did. She was every step of the way, she was there until she died. And I remember her leaning back and I was just ready to go to sleep. And she was humming her two favorite tunes. And I felt I was back under the table where I felt so secure. And I knew what I was going to do. And I knew what I was going to become. And I knew that all was well with the world. Thank you very much. Thank you. Well, thank you. Thanks.